So just before we start the painting side of this video, I thought I would just give you a very quick tour of the model itself. It's incredibly straightforward. It is a Space Marine, Chaos Space Marine body, Chaos Space Marine arms. He has the heavy bolter from the Chaos Space Marine sprue, which is really simple. And then all we've got two tentacles down here from the possessed sprue. So these are possessed tentacles. They're actually from the club hand, the possessed club hand, and I used the club for something else, so I just had these tentacles spare. Same with this one as well. He's then got a possessed head, Chaos Space Marine possessed head, which looks rather cool. I think it looks very Emperor's Children-y actually. And then he's got a possessed backpack as well. So he's pretty much completely from two kits, apart from the Sonic Blaster, I don't know what you call it, like speaker part. That is a hubcap from a Sentinel, an Imperial Guard Sentinel, and I just drilled out the centre. I think it looks quite cool. You can use all sorts of different speakers. So Imperial Guard have loads of speakers on their backpacks. You can use those. That would be a really good option as well. But ultimately, this is a Chaos Space Marine with a heavy bolter with some possessed bits kind of thrown on it. I just think it looks cool. So with that done, let's get to the painting side of it. I'm going to prime it in the Leho matte black primer with an airbrush, and then we're going to start with the colours after that. Okay, let's go. Oh, here we go. And I'm recording this actually the day after the Nova reveals. So we've obviously just seen Fulgrim in Horus Heresy, and I'm sat here painting Emperor's Children, which is very exciting. Anyway, we've got it's all been primed black, and the first paint that we're putting on, we're going to be airbrushing the first few coats, and it's Naggaroth Night. Naggaroth Night is going to give a nice shadow tone in all the shadows. Well, obviously because it's a shadow tone, so it's going to give a nice tone all the way across the model, which we're then going to be able to highlight up and put tones on over the top. This is watered down in the airbrush. It's probably a little bit more than I should have done. You can see it running a little bit, but it doesn't really matter. I'm just kind of sloshing it on and letting it dry. You can put this on with a brush as well. It's absolutely fine. Yeah, so this is going to be all over the whole model. And then we can airbrush and highlight after that. The Emperor's Children, it's always been a chapter that I'm quite interested in, but I've always been struggling a little bit with the purple. So this was an experiment that I did on some on a Thunderhawk for Aeronautica, and I really like the colour scheme, so I thought I'd try it on an actual Chaos Space Marine. So we're going to use some white paint. This is Schminker Titanium White, which I've added a little bit of thinner and water to and popped in a pot. It's just what I use for regular painting. But also I've found out this is the first time I've actually tried it and used it. But if you add a little bit of airbrush thinner, it actually thins down and airbrushes really well. I tend to, for the vast majority of my paints anyway, I tend to mix them in this little metal dish before putting it into the airbrush, just to make sure that everything has been mixed in thoroughly. There's no kind of pigment left glooped together sort of thing, so just make sure that it's a nice good consistency to then pour into the airbrush. This is probably about I don't know what it was. It was a little bit more thinner than paint. I always try for a 50-50 when I'm airbrushing, and then depending on how that comes out of the airbrush, I will thin it maybe a little bit more next time, or a little bit less next time. The only difference is for metallics. When you're airbrushing metallics, I thin those an awful lot. Anyway, we're going to pick out a light source. I do all my painting painted with a light source from camera right. I think that's kind of come over from my photography. I used to do all my photography from lighting from the camera right as well. So pick a light source that you want to work from, and this first kind of initial coat, you've got to go very slowly with this. So you're just kind of dusting it, and I'm trying to dust it all over everywhere, but leaving some purple in the recesses. So this is like a general all over, very thin, almost like a dusty speckled coat. And this will, you'll see why like later on. And then once it's kind of had that speckled coat, thin speckled coat all over it, we can then go back in and just kind of hit some hot spots, which is quite cool. So you'll see me doing the couple on the back, and then these are the important ones. You've got the top of the shoulder pad. I should have put a little bit more on the chest and the head, because the chest and the head come out a little bit darker than maybe I was expecting. So yeah, if you are doing this yourself, just put a little bit more, fraction more. You can see it going on and then drying, and as it dries it goes a little bit more dull, and then you can kind of just keep building up the white. So you can see there that I should have added a little bit more to the chest. Anyway, you can do that when you're doing it. The arms aren't glued on at all, so I can remove the arms in a second, but I've obviously left them on in terms of light sourcing and everything, so that they're creating a natural shadow on the torso. Yeah, so it's just working on and picking out some of the areas for the highlights, which are going to show through once we go with the pink. And again, this is nicely sped up, just so you can see we're just going around and just accentuating and pushing those highlights a little bit. Now, the first magic paint. Now, this is I've been like I say, I've been trying to do purple for a while, and purples are interesting because you can either go cold purple or you can go warm purple. I wanted to do a warm Emperor's Children colour scheme, and one of the ways of doing that is by using magenta. Now, this is Murderous Magenta from P3, and I had the idea of putting it over this kind of pre-highlighted purple, just to see how it looked, and it came out really, really well. So like I say, I thought I'd do a Chaos Space Marine with it. Now, what I'm doing here is it's very, very thin. When you're building up coats with an airbrush like this, I'm sure a lot of you have been watching Cult of Paint, and they'll say the same thing on there. Build it up very, very slowly, because going over, as you're adding this paint, you're putting a very, very thin and highly bright pigmented colour over white. So if you put it on too thick, it will run really, really quickly, and you won't get the correct kind of tone. So just build it up really, really slowly. And one of the things I'm trying to do is I'm concentrating on the areas which I did the kind of the pre-shading, but not the hot spots, if that makes sense. So like the hot spot right at the top of the head, I'm pretty much leaving, and I'm concentrating on getting it everywhere else. And this is a perfect example. When you're doing the shoulder pad, I'm leaving that hot spot, the white hot spot, for the next paint, but everywhere else is getting hit. And this is another reason why I said I should have done a little bit more of a hotspot on the chest, because the chest kind of it loses a little bit of punch in the final thing. Now, this is the one that I really wanted to try. This was, again, just an idea, and this is Magenta Candy from Vallejo. I have no idea whether it's got any kind of actual candy pigments in it. Candy is, when you're talking about car painting, it's got a little bit of metallic fleck into it. I've never used this before. I've had it for years, and I thought, oh, I'll just try it. So anyway, I was mixing it up. This is one of the reasons why I use these sort of mixing pots for when you're using paints that you've not used before, so you can see the consistency in the pot before you put it in the airbrush to see how it's going to go. And then I always just clean them out straight away so that you can reuse them. They don't let the paint dry off. Now this is incredibly thin. This is really thin once it's thinned down. I don't know what it would have been like if it was a little bit thicker. Maybe that's something I'll try on the next model that I do, but because this is really thin, just put it on so slowly. Put it on really, really slowly. It dries reasonably quickly, and what I'm actually doing here is I'm doing the whole model. I'm airbrushing over the whole model, so you get a nice kind of smooth transition. But yeah, it goes on incredibly, incredibly translucent. That may have been because of how I was thinning it down. but it may be just a property of the paint, because it's a candy paint. It might be a little bit more translucent, but yeah, I think this is maybe 4 coats. It's a lot of coats anyway, so throw. I mean, this would be great for when you're painting like a unit of them. And I am going to do a unit of 6 because 6. I'm going to do a unit of 6 Emperor's Children Noise Marines because I think they're going to look really, really cool, especially because now we have a full grim model that we can possibly maybe even use at some point. Anyway, once it's all done, it goes on a little bit glossy anyway once it's all kind of been painted, but I gave it another coat of gloss varnish. That was more for protection than anything else because I didn't know how that candy paint was going to react. So like I say, I've never used the candy paint before, so I didn't want to kind of reactivate it or smoosh it around or anything like that. So I gave it a coat of matte varnish, a gloss varnish, and then that will also help the this oil wash that we're going to put on. So we've got a little bit of blue. I'm sorry, I forget what that blue was. Where's my oils? Was it that one, Prussian blue? So it was Prussian blue with a little bit of black in there as well, just to kind of darken it down. I was thinking about using a purple pin wash as well, but I thought I'd go blue and just kind of cool down all the recesses a little bit more. I wanted to keep like I was saying earlier, like the warm and the cold purples are two very, very, very different kind of colour schemes and colours. So I wanted to keep that kind of cold in the recess and then keep it warm in the highlights. So that's why I went with the blue. Mix it up, a lot of odourless thinner. This is Bob Ross odourless thinner. Little magic accidents. You can't go wrong with a bit of Bob Ross. If you're using his thinner, it just automatically makes you a better painter, right? I mean, that's just how it works. Hopefully. Yeah, this is dead simple. I'm using a synthetic brush, nice little small synthetic brush. I'm just going to go along. I'm going to tap into all the little areas and just run this into recesses. It's going to go all across the whole model really, because once I've done this, it's got a lot of trim on it. Once I've done this, I'm going to go back in and kind of touch up and paint the trim. So I didn't too much mind any kind of staining that went on and a little bit of a filter that went over some of the areas. Tried to keep it very, very careful when I was getting close to the hot spots, those hot highlights. So I was tended to add the ink in and the oil in away from the hot spots and let it run into them, just so I wasn't kind of pulling too much colour and highlights from those hotspots. But yeah, this just goes all over the model, and it creates a nice little Magenta shadow, nice cold shadow everywhere. I think it looks really good once it's all done. And then once it's all done, of course, it gets let it dry. I think I left this one overnight. You could probably do it a little bit quicker if you wanted to throw an airbrush on it. Not an airbrush, a hairdryer. And yeah, once it's all been dry, I throw some matte varnish over it just to kind of seal it all in. I don't quite know where this idea came from to do the Emperor's Children, by the way. I did the Emperor's Children for the Thunderhawk gunship, which I've got a video for that. I will put that up as well at some point. And I thought I'll see how it will go on a Space Marine, Chaos Space Marine, and I pulled out the limited edition Noise Marine, the one with a guitar, and started that. And then really wanted to see what it would look like on a regular Chaos Space Marine. So I think that's where it came from. But yeah, just tippy tap it all around and get it in all the recesses. Make sure you're not missing any. I also made sure that I ran it on as much of the trim as I could. It just helps when you're painting that trim back over again. I think anyway, it kind of gives that nice kind of undertonality of it. The trim on this is going to be black anyway, but yeah, it looks good. And so that's after a coat of matte varnish. So as you can see, it's looking, I like it. I think it looks really, really good. Now, you can take this in many directions from here. I wanted to do black trim just to see what it looked like. With hindsight, maybe I'd try a little bit more gold trim. There's a couple of different ways you can go. If you want to do some gold trim, then you can definitely kind of get some gold in there as well. Just take your direction that you wanted. This is just Vallejo model color black, and we're just kind of going over and just catching anything that I want to paint that isn't the purple armor. Basically, the purple armor, for all intents and purposes, I was trying to do this as an idea for painting and a process for painting more than one model. So this isn't like a display standard or anything like that. Not even slightly. This is army standard painting. So for all intents and purposes, the purple armor is done. I might add a little bit of chipping at some point afterwards, but so yeah, this is black trim on absolutely everything that is not going to be purple or pink. And then once it gets done, I do think it looks really good. Yeah, so this is when we start adding a little bit of bone. So XV88 is my favourite bone colour. We're going to do the skull shoulder pad, and we're also going to do a little bit of kind of wet blending on the horns as well, on the possessed tentacles which are coming out. Again, you can probably paint those any colour you like. Maybe it would look really good with pink tentacles out down at the front. That would also work quite well. We do the horns as well on his head. They're going to be bone as well. There's all sorts of different. I possibly could have found a little bit more reference for Noise Marines and Emperor's Children before I kind of started with this, because I had an idea in my head. It's okay, well, these are going to be bone, this is going to be bone, and maybe some of these should have been gold or a little bit more flamboyant, if you like. But you notice we've done the tentacles down here. So this is very, very thin and wet paint, and I've also got black paint on the wet palette as well, and I'm just taking a little bit of XV88, a little bit of black, keeping a wet brush, and just kind of smushing and merging them together, so you can kind of wet blending these together and getting a nice soft blend, which is one of the easiest ways of getting kind of nice easy transitions. Yeah, so paints, when you do this kind of wet blending, just thin your paints just a fraction more than maybe you would normally, and then you can go backwards and forwards and kind of pull blacks into it, or pull the XV88 up a little bit further, or pull the black down a little bit further if you want the blend a bit lower on the tentacle or the horn or anything like that. Ends up looking quite cool. But yeah, maybe these tentacles could have been pink. I ended up quite liking them with the bone. This is quite an interesting model for me to kind of play around with, because I've never done Emperor's Children, and I've not really done that much purple either. So it's quite interesting to see how this goes. And then you can see on here that kind of wet blending fade that we did on the tentacles. We've also done that on this shoulder pad as well. You can see that bottom side of the shoulder pad is a little bit darker as well. And this is just a very quick and lazy Vallejo matte black wash over the whole model, just to kind of catch out some recesses. Just to darken those down a little bit. This isn't like kind of great painting. It's very functional. I just wanted to see what the model looked like when it finished up. And then the same with the tentacles as well. That use that same wash. Very efficient. Look at me being all efficient. Now these flaming skulls on the back of the backpack, again, these could have been gold. I kind of did them a little bit as if they were bones growing out of the backpack, so you got a little bit of a kind of a bony blend going into the pink on the backpack, just to see if I could show that as a blend in. I think maybe with hindsight they could have been gold. I think they could have been. I think the whole. To be honest, I think there could have been a bit more gold on the whole model. So if you want to kind of throw a bit more gold on these, I would probably lean into something like Viking gold from Scale 75. A nice kind of rich orange gold. I think that would look really good on these. I do throw a little bit of gold in here, but not that much. So yeah, so this is Bugman's Glow. This is my favourite skin paint, and this is for all the skin tones basically. So you got the tentacle tongue. You got the bits around his face that is that's demonically tearing out from his helmet, which is super cool. It's really, really awkward to see. I would either find this model as a reference and find the kind of the heavy metal version of it just for reference on which part is helmet and which part is demonic skin that's tearing away, because it's very, very difficult to see once it's kind of got a generic paint job thrown over it, over the top, or if you've got a second head that's identical, just kind of keep that to one side. I know Neil Hollis from the Slayer Sword winner will have two models that when he's painting something, so that he's got a reference for how things kind of sit together and how things look while he's painting the other one. But yeah, it's a nightmare to try and find what part is what when you're painting this. So yeah, Bugman's Glow, and then this is you mix that in with a little bit of white for the highlights. But yeah, all over the face, all over the tongue, all over the tentacles. And this, like I say, those tentacles down at the front could have been this as well. Maybe it needs to go a little bit more pink, so something like Fulgrim pink would also look good as well with this. But ultimately, I really like Bugman's Glow, and I always tend to lean into that and see how that looks first. And I like it. I think it looks cool. This is one of those, quite a challenging thing actually with this, because the Emperor's Children obviously are purpley pink anyway, and then you've got to kind of balance the blues and the pinks and the purples that you put anywhere else on the model. So I knew I wanted to use kind of some bluey turquoise flames. There was some tentacles and faces and skin and everything around. This is just kind of dotting in the eyes, ready for a little bit of a kind of a turquoise glow. But once you're kind of playing around with Emperor's Children, you've got to kind of balance how pink you want the Emperor's Children, how purple you want them, and then how pink or demonic, or maybe you could do a bit more of a desaturated like pale skin for the demonic skin. That would also work quite well. That might be a direction to go in the future. And then yep, so the next part is just some of the metallics. So this is one of my favourite metallic silver paints, which is black metal from Scale 75. If you see any of my videos, any of my other videos, you'll know that I love doing this. Black metal silver Scale 75 paints are lovely, and this this silver goes on incredibly nicely. So this catches just anything that's mechanical, anything that is needs to be functional rather than elaborate. Like I say, I think I could probably lean in a little bit more into the gold on this. So in fact, the screaming skull that's on the side of the heavy bolter does get kind of picked out in gold later on. That's off screen, but yeah, this is just silver, picking up anything that's metallic and mechanical. Nice and simple job. It is watered down a little bit as well, so the Scale 75 paints they do cover very well, but I do tend to just kind of throw a tiny bit of water, probably one part water to 3-part paints, 3-part paint, something like that, and that's always a safe bet. Now this is when the kind of highlighting up the bone. So XV88, it goes a little bit yellow if you add kind of white or screaming skull to it. It's got like an underlying warmness to the actual paint. So I tend to add a little bit of white to it for the initial highlight, and then I will go towards screaming skull. and then the Screaming Skull, and then white as a final highlight for like an XV88 based bone colour. And then this is just picking out any kind of crevices, any highlights, just to push some contrast. I keep coming back to this, but maybe this skull could have been gold. I think there's some trim on here that you've got to either paint gold or you've got to paint black, and I think painting this one bone maybe was a mistake, but we'll see. I mean, it looks cool when it's finished, and you can really push the details and everything on little skull faces like this that are on legs. I do like this kind of this model. I went through and I've very particularly picked out, and I've picked out 6 now. I've got 6 of them, but I've particularly picked out ones, Chaos Space Marines, that had lots of kind of elaborate trim, because I wanted to be as elaborate and kind of perfection, if you like, as I could with these Emperor's Children. And yeah, so I think that kind of translates quite well over to the Noise Marines as well. So this is the direction we're going to go for the flames. Anything glowy or demonic or flamey on here is going to be turquoise, and then you mix in a little bit of white, which takes the turquoise to kind of like a pale blue, which works really, really well. This is thinned down so that it's nice and thin, and it still covers quite well, but you get a little bit of that kind of purple showing through in certain recesses, which kind of ties the model in and gives it a bit of an ethereal quality in terms of the flame. But I'm going to use this on both sides of the backpack flames and kind of pull them down and blend them in a little bit into the skull as well. So you've got a little bit of kind of soft OSL, if you like, on there, and then I'm also going to use them to glow the eyes as well. So you get a little bit of continuity across the demonic flames and the demonic eyes and everything. It just looks, it's a really, really cool model. I do like it. I'm looking forward to doing the other 5 and seeing how they look on the table. The brush I'm using, it's a Da Vinci. It's a brand new Da Vinci size 1. It's the brushes that I use for a size 1. I use for probably 90% of my painting. I have recently started to use a size 0 a little bit more, just to kind of throw in some textures. But I'm trying to go back to using a size 1, because I when I'm painting with a size 0, I tend to get carried away a little bit, and then things just take longer, and I'm trying to kind of push out the models a little bit quicker. So I'm trying to make myself go to a size 1 just a little bit more often again. But yeah, it was it's an interesting one. A size 1, you can kind of free your marks up a little bit. And this is the turquoise with a little bit of white in it, and then it's just I don't know. I mean, a tiny bit of white with the turquoise makes a massive difference. So you don't need to add much. And then you just progressively add more and more. I think it only has 2 highlights on this one, so there's turquoise with a little bit of white, and then turquoise with a bit more white. Obviously these are flames, so the hot spots on the flames are towards the base of a flame, and as you go further away from the base of the flame, it will cool down, which is why you have those black tips as well on flames. So I've done the same on this one as well. So these ones are blue flames, and the tips are nice and black, and then we can kind of blend that in with a little bit of soft turquoise as well if we need to. But right down at the front, particularly where these flames are kind of coming out of the eyes, that's where you really want to concentrate those kind of bright white spots. So you can go back in and grab a bit more white and just make sure that you're pulling those highlights down to the source of where the flames are coming out of the skulls. I think it's a really cool backpack. The Chaos Space Marines I haven't got that many. I've got some Night Lords, and I'm quite excited to kind of explore them with Emperor's Children. But I haven't got that many Chaos Space Marine stuff. and it's really interesting to see how much detail and cool stuff that's going on Chaos Space Marines. They are insane. There's a lot of detail and a lot of cool, funky little paint jobs and paint tricks you can do with them. There's an awful lot of variety. I do like it a lot. Really, really fun. Just going in and tickling the highlights again at the base of the flames. You can see how like they're hotter down at the bottom, so you get that kind of brightness down at the bottom again. I think it looks starting to look quite cool. There we go. We've already just run a little bit of turquoise around the outside of the eyes as well, so that it looks like the eyes are a little bit glowy. You can probably go back in and just kind of dot the eyes a fraction more, but this is even more white in that turquoise. I've got a little bit too much paint on my brush, but just be soft with the touches, and you won't notice really. Blue flames. So I'm curious to see what once you get to the end of the video, I'm curious to see what you would change with this color scheme. Whether you think it's kind of accurate or not particularly accurate, but like representative of Emperor's Children. Whether you think that the trim should be a little bit more gold, or whether the black is okay, like this skull on the back of in the center of the backpack, whether that should be gold. And yeah, I'm curious to know what you all think, all you Emperor's Children and Chaos Space Marine fans out there. This is like my first venture. I've done a few Night Lords, but Night Lords are easy because they're blue with some blue, lightning, and blood. Like the Night Lords are easy, but yeah, Emperor's Children. Talk to me. What direction should I be going with this? Obviously, it's a very, very nice pink color scheme. I wanted to go a bit more pink than purple on this idea. Final little ticks on the flames. Just a lot of white mixed into this mix now. And there's the final little dot highlight on the eyes as well, just to make sure that they're drawing focus. A nice amount of attention on there. And you'll see a lot of the time when I'm painting eyes, I'll have like lots of little kind of dabbing, dotting attempts at catching them. So I'll have a wet brush and just kind of run the brush over it as many times as I can, as holding the brush as close as I can to the bristles, so I've got full control, and just kind of touching and making that mark definitely. Right, so I think this is just a fraction more of the highlights on the skulls. So we're kind of blending this demonic transformation of the backpack into the skulls a little bit more, and just throwing some texture in everywhere across the back of the backpack. And if you keep these lines kind of running along that length as well, it will give the impression and the illusion that these skulls are kind of forming and demonically possessed out of the backpack as well. So you get those lines going outwards, and then you can kind of create a little bit of texture around those as well. Add the highlights on, final little highlights around the skulls, and then these highlights as well, which we're putting on, we want to make these as bright as we can, because then what you can do is you can soften them a little bit with a turquoise glaze, and then that will give just a little bit of a fraction of OSL, just a bit of soft OSL. So you almost want to over highlight the skulls, because then when you glaze them back, you will knock the highlights down a little bit, but it will give you that impression of a bit of a glowy flame catching the skulls a little bit. Okay, so this is neutral grey. So this is Vallejo. It's a model colour, neutral grey, and I'm just going around and just tickling some of the trim as a highlight. Almost trying to think of this as like volumetric simple non-metallic, if you like. So wherever the light is catching, just kind of doing a volumetric highlight there. Really simple. If you wanted to take this one further, you could mix a little bit of white into this neutral grey, or you could use something like white grey just to kind of add a bit of a final tick, if you liked. But you'll notice that this is thinned down quite a lot. That highlight that you can see on the shoulder there, it almost looks like it's got 2 highlights on it already. So the initial coat was quite thin, and then you go back in once it's dry, and you give it a second kind of tickle with that, and give it a second coat, and it gives you a second amount of translucency and opacity to the paint highlight. So yeah, just working around, catching all these edges now, working on some volumetric highlights on things like the gun and stuff, and working around all of these. Nice and simple. And then so this is that's the skull. I've just highlighted the skull there. There's a lot here. There's a lot of trim, and there's a lot of decisions that you have to make on. Is this going to be a black trim? Is this going to be gold trim? Is this going to be silver trim? And I don't think I quite got it right on this model. So that screaming face on the heavy bolter, on the Sonic Blaster body, I highlighted this up as if it was black trim. Now it does go, and you'll see towards the end of the video, it suddenly, it suddenly becomes gold. I just think the model needed a little bit more gold as I was painting through it. Now this is highlighted up, so as I was saying earlier on in the video, you got to be kind of very careful on what kind of tone you end up with on the skin and everything. I just thought the skin was blending in a little bit too much. So this is actually a very thin full-grim pink glaze, which I'm just throwing over all the highlights and everything which I've put on the skin and the tentacles, just to kind of push that tone a little bit further towards pink and away from the kind of the reddy brown and colder tone that Bugman's Glow has. So I just wanted to throw this a little bit brighter. So yeah, this is a full-grim pink. Just very simple glaze. You can see that it doesn't look like there's barely anything on my brush. That's a very thin kind of glaze which I'm just working on. I think that looks a bit better at tonality. There we go. And then you've obviously got the you've obviously got the tongue as well coming out of the back of the skill on the back. Yeah, I definitely think that needs to be gold. I'm gonna do a little bit of research before I carry on, and I'm just gonna do some referencing and try and find out how much gold should be on an Emperor's Children. This video is just turning into, that's going to be the thumbnail for the video, is how much gold is too much gold on an Emperor's Children. So a little bit of highlight now. So this is just full grim pink with a touch of white, just for a final highlight. It's looking rather good. We need to make sure that the focal point is still the head on this model, so you can see that the horns have had that kind of push of a highlight on them as well. And this is now just kind of lots of little white, which I've actually got some of the full grim pink in my brush as well, so I'm adding that touch of white on the tip, and then using it to blend and soften into the model as I'm painting it. So the way you do that is, if you have full grim pink, kind of a damp brush that's got a full grim pink glaze inside it, if you then get a tip of white, if you've got a very light touch, so this is a very light touch here, then the harder I press, the more full grim pink is going to mix in with that white as I'm painting. So it's kind of like a loaded brush technique. But yeah, it's just one of those lazy things that I do occasionally when I'm trying to paint quickly. And I am trying to paint this one quickly. It's coming out a little bit rough, but I think it kind of leans in and looks all right. And one of the other things that you can do once you've got this white on your brush as well is just kind of pick out the teeth as well. I think we catch the teeth in a little while. In fact, there's one there. So just catching all the teeth, because he's got about 20 teeth. This helmet, which has exploded and it's got its tentacle coming out of it, it's got about 20 teeth around the helmet as well. It's insane. And there's another like 5 teeth on that side. Oh, Chaos Space Marines, so cool. Yeah, and that is, as you will notice, that is white paint straight out of the pot as well, so don't do that. That's very lazy of me. Incredibly light touch to try and just kind of dot highlight the tops of the teeth. I was trying to kind of make them look a little bit shiny and wet, and give that kind of stark, quick highlight. And the same with the tongue as well. Like the tongue should be wet as well, so I was trying to give it like a nice, quick, stark highlight on the tongue to kind of show it as a bit of a wet tongue rather than throwing some gloss varnish over it. I don't know. What do you think? Should things like that have like some goo hanging off them? Like I know people put goo all around like Tyranid things. Like is Chaos Space Marines demonic transformations? Are they gooey and wet and horrible, or are they a little bit more dry? I don't know. I think you can probably go any direction, couldn't you, anyway? Still painting teeth. There's far too many teeth on this model. Far too many teeth and not enough skulls, that's what it is. Although he has got a skull shoulder pad, so maybe not. And there are some more kind of like wet highlights again, those kind of very high contrast shine spots. Right, so the next part on this is going to be a very, very quick red. This isn't particularly complicated at all. This is Mephiston red with a little bit of black, and then just more and more Mephiston red, just kind of wet blended in, with then ultimately just at the end a couple of dots of Evil Sun Scarlet. Like red is, I don't try to over highlight red too much, particularly on this model, because I didn't want to kind of pull the attention away from the pink and the purple. So this is super easy and super quick. That's pretty much it. So just just as the paint is still wet on there, just kind of smush in some Evil Sun Scarlet and pick out some highlight spots. Nice and simple, nice and quick. Looks great, fast sort of thing. Bro. And then the final highlight for the silver that we've put on, you can do a 50-50 on this as well. Black metal and chrome does mix really neatly. However, what I tend to do is just thin down some chrome, make sure I've got a wiped off brush, and then you can kind of softly feather it into the black metal rather easily, as you can see here. Particularly on that kind of highlight across that cylinder on the end. Like chrome goes on incredibly well when you're doing this, and you can kind of soften it down as well. You can get nice kind of soft, quick transitions. Just make sure that you haven't got too much paint on the brush. That's the main thing. It's not particularly thin down. I think you might have like a tiny little drop of water in the chrome. I do use this on the wet palette, so that's probably where I get a little bit of the thinning from. So from highlighting that screaming skull face on the gun black and then highlighting it with grey, I've now started highlighting it with the silver. I still can't quite decide what colour I want to have that gun, that skull, and like I say, towards the end it ends up being gold as well. So, oh dear. Yeah, this is a lot of kind of attacking this model and then changing my mind as I'm going, which is absolutely fine. Like, I think a lot of people do that as well. So don't worry about changing your mind halfway through painting a model. But again, you don't. It's not something that you need to strip. It's not like you need to strip the model and start again or anything. It's just paint, so you can just easily just paint over it. It's absolutely fine. If you make a mistake or if you're painting something and you don't like the color, because you're always thinning the paint and you're putting it on nice and thin, just paint over it with a different color. If you make a mistake, just paint over it. It's absolutely fine. It's one of the best things about freehand, as I always say. So yeah. And one of the last kind of things, and it's a conversation that I've been having with myself a lot. One of the parts of the hobby which I struggle with a little bit is basing. So if you have any ideas on maybe some kind of 3D print bases to use for this, is one of the directions I'm trying to go, just to take a little bit of thought process out of it, so I don't have to kind of rummage around and just try really hard to make like the perfect ruined rubble base. I'm starting to kind of just 3D print some bases at the moment. So if you know any kind of Emperor's Children-y, I don't know whether to go really demonic or whether to go ruins, but yeah, if you've got any ideas for 3D printed bases for Emperor's Children, then please let me know down in the comments below. But that is the pretty much the finished model. You'll see that the skull on the gun has gone gold now, but yeah, please let me know what you think. Let me know if there's anything that you would change, and please let me know like if there's like a ratio of gold trim to black trim, or maybe even that this model would look better with gold trim. I'm not sure. Maybe that's one thing that I can do next time. But thank you very much for watching. I apologise for having a slightly longer video on this one, but I thought it'd be quite fun just to show you the whole process. And you can catch me on Twitch most days of the week. It's twitch.tv/Chris Frostin. And obviously you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, anything like that at Chris Frostin as well. Drop me a like and a subscribe. That would be amazing. I'm trying to get to 1 million subscribers on YouTube, which is going to be phenomenal when it happens. But until the next video, I hope you enjoyed this one, and please send me and tag me in all of your Emperor's Children when you work on yours. Thanks very much, everybody. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.